And welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of Fridays with Phillip on the Auburn Undercover podcast and the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. Of course, the titular Phillip Marshall is here. Ronnie Sanders joins as well. And you guys, show will be out on Friday. So it'll be 8 days until the season opener for Auburn football. It's obviously the offseason is, as usual, feels like it has absolutely flown by. So we'll get into some of the recent updates with the team going into the 2024 season, and got a fun show planned for you guys today. Phillip, the first thing we wanted to talk about was some quarterback stuff in the news for Auburn. It is no longer their starting quarterback situation, as it feels like it's been for the past 5 years. They've had a quarterback competition. There was no such competition this year. Peyton Thorne had that thing locked down pretty much from the spring. But Hugh Freeze did say he wanted to name a backup and obviously get the reps going for a number 2 guy. It ends up being Hank Brown. Holden Gariner has had that spot, at least when we've seen it, the majority of the second team reps for a long time now. But Hank Brown comes in. Obviously, he was a guy who's committed to Freeze at Liberty. He's been around Ken Austin and Freeze for some time now. And now going into his second year at Auburn, they have named him the backup quarterback. Just talk about the importance of that position, because obviously Peyton Thorne, you can make a great argument, is the most valuable player on this team. Anything happens to him, they need to make sure Hank Brown is in a good position to succeed.
Well, they do, and honestly, I thought it would be Gariner. That's what I thought. Not really based on anything, but they have, Hank Brown was not highly recruited, as indicates that he was on his way to Liberty. But people I talked to at Auburn when he came said this guy's got a real chance. He can really spin it, and I didn't, and still don't, to be honest with you. I didn't put a lot of stock in what happened in the last few minutes of the Music City Bowl. I mean, they weren't rushing anymore, and they were playing soft coverage. And I mean, don't get me wrong, he threw the ball extremely well, but he wasn't under any pressure and of any kind, because the game was basically already decided. So, I look back and at backup quarterbacks, I mean, Damian Craig was a backup he was redshirted, and then he was a backup for 2 years. Mm-hmm. He didn't play until he didn't start until his 4th year. But had he been needed, he could have. That was a comfort, and he was kind of, I guess, one of the first Wildcat quarterbacks coming in when Auburn was on the goal line in 1996. Yeah. 1995 would have been what I'm talking about, because he wasn't the starter. He started in 96 and 97.
That's right.
I mean, ideally, what you would like to have is you would like to always have a guy sitting there waiting but what you have to have, Ohio State beat Alabama in the national championship game with a 3rd-string quarterback. And, there's been numerous times when that's happened. And for sure, when a quarterback had to, a backup at some time during the season, had to become the starter, or you can all of a sudden the starter gets hurt and it's a tie game in the 4th quarter, and you got to go in and do something. And I guess the most famous play by a backup quarterback at Auburn was when Stan White was injured against Alabama in 1993, and Patrick Dix came in cold off the bench and threw a touchdown pass, a 4th down touchdown pass, 30-something yards to Frank Sanders, which turned the game around. And so that's got to be, from what I've heard about Hank Brown, I don't know him, but from what I've heard about Hank Brown, he's the kind of guy that will prepare as if he was going to be the starter. And you have to have that. You have to have the guy, the next guy up has got to be ready to go in and do what you do. If you have to go to a guy that has limited knowledge of the offense, then that's trouble. Now, I don't believe this, what this means to me is that he's a backup quarterback this season. Next season, Walker White will be in the mix. Perhaps Deuce Knight, assuming he goes ahead and flips Notre Dame, which seems to be widely expected. And what Holden Garriner does, from what I understand, he really loves it at Auburn, loves the coaches. But if that's the most important to him, then he may stay and try to compete again, or just do whatever role he has. But if he wants to be a starter, if that's his main thing, then you'd have to think that he'll have to consider looking somewhere else.
Yeah, Freeze used the word gunslinger, Phillip, when talking about Hank Brown on Monday, and I think there's an element of that is important, at least in my opinion. I'm not saying Holden Garriner is timid by any means. He's not. You don't get to be a 4-star quarterback at Auburn by being timid, but there is an element, I think, of Hank Brown combined with the fact that Freeze and Ken Austin have been evaluating this guy and attempting to nurture him into a good quarterback for the better part of 3 years now. But, I'm with you. I don't think the Maryland game mattered for much of anything because they weren't even running the RPO anymore and Maryland had their backups in. However, it did sort of give you that taste of if he gets an opportunity in a game, he is going to just say, if a guy's down there, I'm just going to uncork it and let it down there. And I think that is an element of things. We saw it in the first scrimmage. Phillip, the offense was kind of messing around a little bit, not doing much. He uncorks one to Perry Thompson down the field, and then they started getting going from there. So it was interesting to hear Hugh Freeze use that word gunslinger when kind of praising Holden Garriner, because I think, look, if an SEC game comes up, Peyton Thorne is out for a couple quarters, you don't want to just show everyone that you're running the ball every single play. They've got good receivers, and clearly Hank Brown has shown that he's confident to put it down the field to him.
One-dimensional offense. I mean, I guess you could have said that the late Mike Leach's offense was mostly one-dimensional, though a lot of their passing game was really just throwing the ball forward in the running game. But if you only throw it or only run it, then you're probably not going to be able to do either one, and you're going to lose. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I imagine you would hope that we get to see some of him in the first game against Alabama A&M. And, and it's not impossible you could see any of them because, I mean, Walker White can play in 4 games and still be redshirted. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if Walker is on the scout team or not. If he is, then it's kind of hard to put the scout team quarterback in usually.
We'll talk a little bit more about the importance of, we talked a little bit a minute ago about Damian Craig, but especially in an expanded SEC and in the era of a new 12-team playoff, how important is a backup quarterback?
Well, I think it's extremely important. I think if you don't have one, you're holding your breath. I think if you don't have one, then you're going to be hesitant to use your quarterback in the run game. I mean, you're going to be worried about protecting him and not getting him hurt. I mean, obviously nobody wants anybody to get hurt, but it's just a different deal than if you got somebody over there you trust. And has Hank Brown earned that kind of trust yet? I don't know, but obviously they saw him as the best option. And I was really going in. I kind of figured because I've seen this happen a lot of times. While in their minds and the players probably know who the backup quarterback is, sometimes they just don't say who. And so that tells me that probably that Hank must have separated himself from the other 2 guys. And I'm not surprised. Walker White's a freshman. Tommy Tuberville used to call playing freshman child abuse. So, but so it's obviously they have trust in him, and he seems like a guy that's going to be fun to watch play.
Seems that way. Phillip, talk about the 12-team playoff coming this season.
Well, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be good for coaches and bad for coaches. It's going to be good for coaches because 8 more teams are going to get in the playoff. It's going to be bad for coaches because their fans are going to expect them to get in the playoff every year.
Every year.
I mean, which is really kind of silly because, all right, one group of 5 teams going to get in, so that leaves 11 spots. And if you're the number 11 team in the country, you're pretty dang good.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like that it's just automatic you ought to get in the playoff. Now, and the most interesting part to me is going to be how many the SEC and the Big Ten get. I would say SEC will get 3 or 4 would be my guess. And the Big Ten, probably 3. The Big 12 is not probably going to get more than 1. And the ACC, probably maybe 2. So the rich are going to continue to get richer. But the other interesting thing is that, like Notre Dame will never have a bye. Everybody else, if you can win your conference, not only will you be in, you'll have a first round bye, even if you've lost a bunch of games, if you can win your conference. But Notre Dame can't do that. So they're always going to have to play in the first round. I think having a bye in a football tournament is huge.
No question.
I think that's a huge advantage. And then the I guess 5, 6, 7, and 8 will play at home in the first round.
I believe so.
Now that should be fun. A playoff game at a campus stadium. That'd be a big deal. And but I would not every year probably, but I would wager that most years one of those teams that got by win it in the end.
What do you think about as expansion accelerated, as conference realignment has accelerated? And obviously conferences have grown and playoff spots have grown and all those things, but the Rutgerses and the Mississippi States and the Vandys and the Indianas, does the expanded playoff help those programs, or does it just?
Well, I think it only helps them in that they can say, "Hey, we got a chance." We got a chance. Whereas with the 14 playoff, they had no chance, and they don't have much chance now. But they can convince themselves that they do, and I think it's not that much different, really, for those teams. One big difference: do it away with divisions is a big difference. I mean, I was thinking about that the other day. I was looking back at, in the early part of the playoff, the East was stronger,
mm-hmm.
and I didn't go back and look and add it up, but I know that Auburn got in with 3 losses. Arkansas got in a couple of times with 3 losses into the SEC championship game, and then it flipped. And Jim McElwain at Florida got in the playoff twice, not the playoff, championship game twice, with bad teams. And, not maybe bad's overstating it, but not very good teams, not championship caliber teams. So it's gonna be quite different in that way. Because those teams are not going to get in the championship game now, with just taking the top 2, and that's just a lot of things is going to be really kind of fascinating to watch this season.
Well, and it's like you said before. I mean, so some of those teams, I mean, how many of those Mississippi State teams? Maybe they do, but how many of those Mississippi State teams and Arkansas and some of those programs that made it into the SEC championship game over the past, since 1992.
None of them would have made it in this.
None of them would have made it now. Yeah.
None of them. That's exactly right. And it's going to be tougher from that standpoint. And the SEC championship game, and some people have said that the championship game will be diminished because both teams are probably going to the playoff, most likely, almost certainly. But I still say that first round bye is a pretty valuable prize.
Well, not only is it
win it, you get it.
And not only is it a pretty valuable prize, but I think that, I think most coaches that coach in the Southeastern Conference, most coaches that coach in any conference, but especially in the SEC, winning the Southeastern Conference is not a small accomplishment.
No. And I think people football is different. I mean, winning the regular season championship in basketball or baseball or softball is fun, but it's not as important. But it's not as important as what's coming after. But it is a big deal, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't see at least in the minds of coaches and players, I don't see that being diminished. But it might be diminished in the eyes of the fans. I don't know.
Well, I have to agree with you from a coaching / player standpoint. I think that you make it to Atlanta or wherever the championship game ends up being over the next several seasons, and
you look at Steve Spurrier,
mm-hmm.
who nobody would argue is one of the great coaches. Well, he won one national championship.
That's right.
A bunch of SEC championships.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when it becomes that the only way you can make yourself one of the elite is to be the last team standing. I don't think that's good for the game, and I don't think it's true. I mean, Washington had a great year last year. Texas had a great year last year. Alabama won 11 straight games last year, but they didn't win the championship. So people just want to write them off. I'd say those were all great teams. And the truth is, if you put them all out there again and played 2 weeks later, probably a different team would win it. And
you make a good point with Spurrier, though. Spurrier would always talk about, well, a lot of people now don't remember Spurrier, but Phillip, we're old enough to remember. I mean, well, we won 11 games, but we didn't really win anything.
Yeah, but he never ever would say that he said numerous times that their goal was to win the SEC championship.
That's right.
And then if you do that, then you'll have a chance to do more. But and I really think that's the way most people look at it. It's kind of like it's like if you're trying to stop doing something, if you quit drinking or quit smoking or something like that, don't look way off in the distance at how long it's going to take and how hard it's going to be. Try not to smoke or drink or whatever that day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really kind of the same. If you go in the season saying that a national championship is the only thing that matters, and then all of a sudden you're not in the running anymore, then what do? Well, you got to keep playing and have the best year you can. But the playoff it's going to be the most interesting part to me is going to be how often, and again, it will happen, but how often one of the bottom 3 or 4, let's just say one of those 4 teams is in but has to play on the road the first week. I mean, how often anybody's going to get out of that and make any noise? Like I said, it will happen, but when you're playing those kinds of teams, you got to go on the road.
It's
Hard to win.
for sure. Talk about, speaking of hard to win, what about Auburn's hoop schedule that just dropped yesterday?
Nathan's a basketball expert here, but it is the most challenging schedule, non-conference schedule that I believe I can never remember at Auburn. But I mean, they should have a really good team. And here's the thing you have to remember: Alabama last year, they played a similar non-conference schedule to what Auburn's playing this year, and they didn't win very many of them. And then they lost 9 out of their last 12 games. But because of that early schedule, when they didn't win many games, they were still the number 4 seed.
They were 1 spot behind Auburn on the seed line.
Right, exactly. So it's the right thing to do in basketball, assuming you have a good enough team to do it. Now, if you got just a run-of-the-mill mediocre team, you're gonna go out there and get beat by 25 points 3 or 4 times. That's not going to help you. But I don't see that happening. And I'd be surprised if Auburn doesn't win their share of those games.
Yeah, I think, Phillip, and I'm interested to hear what you think about this. I think Bruce Pearl knows, he has a finite number of years coaching left.
Yeah.
I mean, he's talked about that. He's closer to retirement than not, obviously.
Well, a lot of us are, Nathan. It's okay.
I think there's an element of this. You talk about this is a good team. There's an element of it. I think, if he thought this team was going to go out there and get slaughtered every,
he wouldn't have scheduled like that.
Would not have scheduled them. So I think there is an element of confidence there, where you're thinking, look, I don't know how many more teams I'm going to have like this that are this well put together, that are returning All-American. Let's do it. Let's shoot for the moon. Let's
I'm sure good teams. I'm sure, even though he doesn't talk about it, at least not that I've heard, but I'm sure that he has a burning desire to win it all before he hangs up. I mean, it was right there in 2019. I mean, honestly, were it not for not calling a flagrant double triple, they would have beaten Virginia without any question. And I believe they would have beaten Texas Tech.
Yep, I agree.
And so that had to be a bitter pill to swallow. And plus, I don't think many officials would have called the foul they called at the end of the game either. But anyway, that's digging up old stuff. But I think this team is good enough to have a chance. The problem is there's a lot of teams, not a lot, but a number of teams that are good enough to have a chance. One of them is in his own state.
Yeah, and it's going to be brutal start to finish.
Well, I saw where he said the other day that there's, I think he said 9 teams in the SEC in the top 30.
Yep.
And
that's after playing the best non-conference schedule probably in history.
When you go on the road to play those teams, you're going to have to be that. You're going to lose maybe a lot of them.
Only 5 of their first 12 games in the SEC, Phillip, are at home. Wow. They play. I'll just run through it here for those who haven't seen it. At home against Missouri, at Texas, at South Carolina, at home against Mississippi State, at Georgia, home against Tennessee, at LSU, at Ole Miss. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of your first 8 SEC games are on the road. That's tough. Oklahoma, Florida at home, at Vandy, at Alabama, 3 straight home games: Arkansas, Georgia, Ole Miss, at Kentucky, at Texas A&M. And then the part I'm honestly most excited about from yesterday's announcement. Saturday, final day of the regular season at home against Alabama.
Yeah, that's right.
Could be a massive game.
Could be a very massive game, and it's on Saturday. Both Alabama Auburn games are on Saturday,
Yep.
are they not?
Yep. They hadn't played one on Saturday in Tuscaloosa in like 6 years or something like that.
Well, and here's the thing that and so it's kind of hard to get used to. But if I was doing a preseason poll of the SEC, that'd probably be 1-2. And some people probably put Tennessee up there, but I wouldn't. But I don't see anybody that's got more than either one of those teams has. And so yeah, it'll be fun. And like you said, the last day of the season, that'll be. You think they'll sell it out? Maybe.
I doubt it.
But it takes some getting used to for. But in the SEC, I mean, Arkansas basically has most of Kentucky's team, I guess, don't they?
Yes.
And this would be my concern if I was Arkansas. He never got over that final hump since 2012. Never got over the final hump at Kentucky. So can you do it at Arkansas? I don't know. And
I think maybe that's just one of those situations where, and it's again just my opinion, but I think maybe that's one of those situations where it was just time for both sides. And did Kentucky upgrade coach wise? Probably not. And is Arkansas a better program than Kentucky? No. But are they both better off without each other? Probably.
I'm not I'll be bluntly honest and say I'm not a Calipari fan. One is he's probably the only coach coaching that had to vacate tournament wins twice at two different schools. And but that's not it as much as all the games I've covered that he coached. There's a good many of them. And when he's lost, and in recent years, when he comes to Auburn, he's usually lost. But it's never about how Auburn played. It's about what they should have done, and if they would have won. I think it's going to be interesting to see with Kelly Board, Alabama. I think that at some of those kinds of places, sometimes Alabama in football, Kentucky in basketball, it even goes over to the coaches that they're just supposed to win, and if they didn't, something strange must have happened.
Even last year when they came here and lost, not to pile on, but he went after the reporters right away. He went after their media, talking about how much they'd criticized the team recently.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he left, we were talking to some of the Kentucky beat writers, which is a crew obviously that runs real deep at road games, and they were like, we don't know where that came from. All we've been doing is talking about how the team is like. They were all very surprised. It would be one thing if a certain person had written something. They were all just like, I don't know. They've lost games. What do you want me to do?
Well, I was once summoned to Sonny Holloway's office so he could tell me he was tired of me being so negative. And my response was, if what I've written is negative, then it's because what's happening is negative. And there's nothing I can do about that.
Well, Phillip, he wouldn't say that, man.
At which time he told his assistant coaches that any of them talked to me, he was going to fire them. Really good guy.
Didn't take long to get fired after that, did it?
Him and Brian Harsin would just be a real fine pair together.
We're actually going to have them on the show next week, Phillip.
Speaking of Harsin, it's great seeing him on Twitter, talking about Bo Nix all the time.
Oh my goodness!
I'm sure that Bo really benefited from his tutelage. What do you think?
Mike Bobo told me himself that his words were, Harsin's wanted to get rid of Bo Nix since the day he walked in the door. What he said. Or wanted to, because he wasn't here anymore when he said that. But we could go on and on about Harsin. But Bo Nix, I am really happy for that young man. Going to be the starting quarterback for the Broncos in the first game. Jarrett Stidham is the backup. So that's 5 consecutive years of Auburn quarterbacks there, 17 through 21, right? 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, yeah. Or the starter and the backup on the same team. He's extremely intelligent. He's a terrific athlete. I think that it was obvious Sean Payton liked him. A lot of people were shocked when he was the first player, when he was picked in the first round. But the one thing, and I know some people are bitter about it, but it's very clear that he did what was in his best interest when he left and went to Oregon.
And it had nothing to do with Auburn. It had to do with the situation at Auburn. I don't think anybody with any.
Well, hey, listen, Bo was an Auburn graduate, like the rest of his family. Mm-hmm. And I haven't talked to him, but I'm pretty sure he still loves Auburn probably as much as ever.
Well, and like I say, I mean, you look at the turmoil going on at Auburn, whether it was the president or the AD or the coach or all three at the same time, or you pick it. But I don't think anybody that knows Bo Nix or his family really thinks that Bo had anything. Bo or his family had anything against Auburn. I think it was, like you said, he did what was best for him.
One thing for sure is a guy that didn't love the place where he was playing wouldn't do what he did and play over half a game on a broken ankle. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's until he finally just couldn't do it anymore. And meanwhile, the offense was giving up 40 unanswered points to Mississippi State. I mean, the defense. But I'm happy for him. I'm happy for his family. I've known his dad, obviously, since he played. Known his mom just before they were married. So I'm happy. I'm happy for all of them.
It's 5 years ago this month that he beat out. I was going to my senior year at Auburn. He beat out Joey Gatewood for the starting job. Mm-hmm. And you and I were talking before we got going, Phillip. Our buddy Henry from the rival site had a funny tweet today for quoting the Broncos tweet. He said he's only starting because of his dad. Yeah, I remember that argument back at Auburn, but it was a little bit cathartic, I think, for a lot of people who heard those arguments when he was up against Gatewood, heard those arguments when he was up against TJ Finley, for him to go be put in a better situation at Oregon and be a Heisman finalist. It's like, yeah, why were we even having this discussion in the first place?
Speaking of TJ Finley, I'm happy for him too.
Absolutely.
He's done well, and obviously that it wasn't going to work for him in the SEC, but my dealings with him, he was a really nice young man. And I'm happy. It seems like he's been playing forever now. He's at Western Kentucky now with our old friend Will Friend.
Will Friend and Coy Moore.
Yeah, Coy Moore.
Very late. They are now going to be teammates at 3 different schools because they were at LSU together.
That's right. I hadn't thought of that. That's right.
And you were talking about that Mississippi State game, Phillip. Just a little story and kind of a window. Putting together the backup quarterback conversation. I remember doing a story that fall on TJ when he became the full-time starter at the end of the year because Bo was out. And I was talking to his mom, and they had low down seats in that end zone at the end of that Mississippi State game. And TJ would communicate with his parents often and just wave and, after a drive, whatever. And when they were watching Bo hobble around on the sideline. And at one point they said TJ looked back at them and just shook his head like that, saying like he's not going to be able to do it. And his mom was just telling me, watching TJ's body language going in, how difficult it is to go in like that into a game when you don't expect to, watching him scramble on the bench to get everything together, watching him scramble to talk to the coaches. And so I think that's just another sort of window into that backup quarterback spot. It's important to have a guy prepared. It's important to have a guy prepared during a game, because I think people see someone like that situation. I think Finley came in
and then when he went in, they blitzed the heck out of him.
Right.
He had no chance.
Yep. And I think people see that, and they, a lot of times, because that happens to backups a lot of times, and they go, this guy just doesn't have it. But then you need a little bit of context into, it is almost as surprising sometimes to them as it is to the fans when the starter can't go anymore.
It's recency bias, I guess they call it. But after TJ led the winning drive against Georgia State, then it was about, he's better than Bo. He wasn't, and it's that Georgia State game, and the two games I can remember the most that I thought, if this happens, the coach is in trouble, with that Georgia State game and the Jacksonville State game in 2015. I was really shocked Auburn was going to play Jacksonville State again. I didn't figure they would ever do that again. Because Jacksonville State should have won.
Mm-hmm.
John Cohen probably does not have the scars that everybody else does. He was totally fine with scheduling that one.
I don't know what the coach was thinking in that game, because they had like 3rd and 4, and all they had to have was the first down, and they were going to kneel down with the ball. And Auburn had a terrible time tackling their quarterback all day. And instead of getting him on the corner trying to make a play, they just turned around and handed it to the tailback, who got stuffed. And tell me if I'm wrong about this, Ronnie, because I saw it too a few times. Louisiana Tech in 1990 was ahead 14-13 in the final minutes of the game, and they had 4th and like 2 or 3 around the 40-yard line, and they punted, and Auburn went right back down the field and won the game. I think sometimes coaches are looking at this game and they think, well, we've been better than them the whole game, but the problem is they're not better.
That's right.
And the other side still has better players.
Mm-hmm.
And more times you give them a chance to win, the more likely they're going to do it.
Well, and the other team usually knows they're better. That's the other thing. Especially when you're at home. If you're Auburn and you're playing at home against Jacksonville State.
So see, to me, exactly. So I'm not going to punt the ball and say we just got to stop them, because there's a good chance you won't be able to. And of course, then Jacksonville State, they also shanked the punt. So, and then Auburn scored and won in overtime.
Remember
I
Utah State?
don't know that any coach could survive losing to Jacksonville State, especially then. I mean, Jacksonville State, at least now, is an FBS team. They were an FCS team then, and that'd be tough. It'd still be tough even with them being an FBS. That's why they don't play UAB or Troy, and I wouldn't play Jacksonville State now either.
I don't think I would either. Do you remember the Utah State game, the onside kick game?
No. Yeah. Yep. That was one of the best onside kicks I've ever seen.
It hit the spot.
But that's when I started thinking this team doesn't play very good defense. And they didn't.
They didn't.
And Then the next, I think it was the second game, they beat Mississippi State like 40 something to 40 something, and Mississippi State quarterback, kid from Montgomery, they had a chance to either win it or send it to overtime. I'm not sure I remember which one, but anyway, they're on like the 2-yard line and it's fourth down, and he tries to run it in and just gets knocked up in the air and falls and falls on his shoulders. I mean, like straight down, and he's about that far from the goal line. I mean, he was clearly short, but that's how close it was. But see, y'all get me talking about these games. Old games. I remember them better than the most recent games.
We'll do 2 quick hitters before we let you go, Phillip. Pete Carroll's returned to USC to be a professor. I assume you saw that this week.
No, I did not see that.
Pete Carroll is returning to USC to teach a class, although that class remains unspecified last I checked.
He's just going to teach a class and doesn't know what?
That's ESPN reported last night he was going to be teaching a class. I posted on the message board, but it didn't say said the class was which class he was teaching was unknown. Maybe they've updated it today, but I haven't seen it.
That's interesting. That's okay. I don't know. Do what?
Compare. We'll move on from that, Phillip. So compare. Having been around a while, as you have,
I've been around a long time.
Yeah, so you know the different personalities of the programs and the coaches and the teams around the league. How would you compare? And again, not a game's been played yet, but compare Texas' arrogance to Alabama's arrogance over the past.
I think Texas is worse.
It seems, as hard as that is to believe, that seems to be the case, doesn't it?
Well, here's the thing: Texas has for many years been in a conference where it could push everybody else around. And but the big problem with Texas' arrogance is they had a good year last year for the first time in a decade. I mean, they have struggled, and they won the national championship in, was it 2005 when they won it? Beat USC with.
I think it was. I think, is that right?
They played Alabama in 2012.
06?
06?
06, yeah.
Okay.
It might have been the 2005 season. It was the 2005 season. You got it, Phillip.
Right. Yeah. Okay. It was 2012. They played Alabama and lost. But other than that, I mean, I hear their AD say brag about their brand and their number one brand in college football and all this stuff.
And they're still going to be they'll still be the premier team on every
premier brand in the SEC.
Yeah,
well, you don't hear Alabama saying that. You don't hear Kentucky saying that about basketball.
I think if you look down the rankings, I look down. I posted that on the message board a few weeks ago, and I actually went back and looked at the top-rated games for the last several seasons. And when you compare, from a rating standpoint, when you compare Alabama and Auburn and Georgia and LSU and some of those programs, I mean, the ratings for those programs were significantly higher overall than Texas's were. And so I find that a little bit ridiculous myself. But
I do too. And here's the thing: if you're the best, then you don't have to tell everybody you're the best. It's but you can't have 4 losing seasons in 10 years, which is what they've had. 4 losing seasons the last 10 years at Texas. You can't do that and claim to be the best. The way I'm not familiar enough with the Big Ten, but You know, you would think Michigan has just become one of the top 2 or 3 programs in the country because they won it fair and square last year.
Well, the fair and square part, the
game itself. But I
their
saw
head coach,
somewhere the other day where they said that they had found that Michigan had hacked into Ohio State's practice video.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but does Harbaugh not have a 4-year show cause? No?
Yeah, but suspended twice last season.
Mm-hmm.
Would have been suspended for a year if he was still there and have a 4-year show cause.
Yeah, something tells me he's not come back to coach on the college level.
No, of course
Probably
not.
ever.
But people who work for him, people who play for him, they love him. It seems pretty obvious to me that he's not fully full of integrity.
Seems like he'll certainly walk up to the line about as close as you can walk, and maybe to step over it once in a while.
Well, I mean, and I hate to say I just think somebody's lying, but you would have a hard time convincing me that he didn't know what was going on with that guy scouting everybody.
Well, as was last week, a lot of what came out last week from the investigation was that Sharon Moore, the morning that happened, the morning the media stuff started swirling around Stallions, he deleted 52 text messages between the two of them, which is what innocent people do, by the way. They go and
he said the other day, well, I hope they come out. You'll see. Well, why'd you delete them then?
At the end of the day, I don't know if you read that whole thing, Phillip. Some of the stuff they were whacking, like I didn't really realize Denard Robinson was on the staff there as well, but a coach taking a recruit to a golf fundraiser, they're going to penalize him for that. Helping a kid get verified on social media because that costs money. And I'm like, y'all, can we please focus on the stuff that we actually need to focus on?
What they do is when they want to get somebody, okay, they got whatever the big deal is, and then they get as much little stuff as they can. Because they say they're not paying attention to the rules, which is true. Go by the rules. I mean, they're not that complicated. And what doesn't matter at all to me is, well, they could do that now. Well, maybe so, but they couldn't then. And you're still just ignoring the rules. And even if Jim Harbaugh thinks they're dumb rules, they're still dumb rules.
And if he doesn't like them, he can go get them changed or try to get them changed like everybody else.
Yeah.
Or just go to the NFL, make